I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
Hello horror hounds, and welcome to my horror house, and welcome back to Monster Mondays, our look back at the films of Godzilla. We are at the fifth film in the Showa period. That's the first chunk of movies from 1954 through to 1975. And a film called Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster. The Earth is experiencing strange weather phenomena and nightly meteorite showers when a large meteorite lands in a remote Japanese mountain region. Meanwhile, foreign Princess Selina is visiting Japan, but her plane explodes mid-air. The Shobijin, Mothra's tiny twin fairies, are in town on a TV show, and then later on, a lady resembling Selina turns up in Japan, claiming to be from the planet Venus, and warning that the planet is on the brink of destruction. Police, journalists, and the princess's would-be assassins all want to get to her. She prophesies the return of Godzilla and Rodan, and the potential Earth-ending space monster King Ghidorah. Then, the meteorite splits open. All the titans who are currently scrapping in this year's Godzilla King of Monsters had their first monster mash right here. There's Rodan, a bird-like monster, perhaps a little like a pterodon. You'd have thought he'd be a more convincing foe for Godzilla than a giant moth was in Mothra vs. Godzilla. Sadly, his puppet isn't up to much beyond flapping and pecking. And whilst I love the character's scrappy attitude, essentially he and Godzilla have beef because when Rodan first spots him, he bombs him for a laugh and then flies off. Their fight fails to convince. Naturally, Godzilla's back, and we're getting goofier with every film at this point. Godzilla has much more noticeably large, round, sort of ping-pong ball-shaped eyes to make him less animalistic and more anthropomorphic. His fight with Rodan is played for laughs. There's a little bit of slapstick in there, with each of them essentially laughing at the other when they get gunked by Mothra's sticky silk. Mothra is still in her larval stage, one of the survivors from the end of the previous film, Mothra vs. Godzilla. But still, Mothra is ever the mediator. It falls to her to try and broker an alliance between Godzilla and Rodan so that all three can team up and defeat Ghidorah. Which brings us to King Ghidorah, Godzilla's most famous and formidable foe. He's golden, he has 3 heads, he can fly, and he can shoot lightning from each of those 3 mouths. Ghidorah is a space monster responsible for the destruction of the Venusian culture. His MO seems to be to travel from planet to planet and destroy everything he finds there. In this current film, Godzilla King of Monsters, he's described as a living extinction event, and that pretty much perfectly sums it up. About 30 minutes in, and the downdraft from Rodan's wings destroys a few buildings, but that scene is brief. Godzilla rocks up about 10 minutes later and destroys a cruise liner with his atomic breath, but again, that's all over very quickly. A few minutes later, Godzilla makes landfall and knocks down a few model buildings. Sadly, there are none of the wonderful composite shots we've had in previous entries. The models and the people reacting are always in separate shots. These are just placeholder introductions to bring the characters of Godzilla and Rodan back into play, to put their chess pieces back on the board. A little later, Ghidorah emerges in an explosion from his meteorite, and then nothing. I get that people were frustrated with Gareth Edwards' 2014 Godzilla in a film that kept cutting away somewhere else every time the monsters were about to fight, but clearly the franchise has form in this regard. At about the hour mark, Godzilla and Rodan start to scrap, and then we cut back to a bloody meeting. Then, finally, Ghidorah starts to level cities with a flyby liberally pouring on lightning rays, destroying the buildings below. It's all models, no people, but after continued teasing, it's great to get a solid chunk of collateral damage. The final fight is a little like a Sunday afternoon cartoon. It's fun enough, but it lacks any real heft or sense of scale. Again, everything is framed separately. Here's a shot of the monsters fighting. Here's a shot of some scared people. Here's a shot of an explosion. None of it's joined up. The puppeteers are clearly having trouble moving Ghidorah's three heads around independently, so they tend to bob and sag in unison. Godzilla's rehabilitation takes its next important step in this film. Albeit reluctantly, he is now one of Earth's defenders, even though he's hilariously reluctant to join the fray. I love the bit where Mothra tries to convince he and Rodan to help her fight Ghidorah to save the humans, and he basically says, translated through the Mothra fairies, that he doesn't really give a toss about the humans. They always hassle him, so why should he help them? This little section of the film with the Shibujin translating the conversations between the three titans makes massive strides towards turning these creatures into personalities rather than mindless animals. Sure, it's a little goofy, but with Godzilla, Mothra and Rodan all coming from their respective origin movies and teaming up to defeat a threat, it beat Avengers by almost 50 years. As nutty as a film sounds, which includes a princess who's mind-controlled by a Venusian to warn Earth of its impending catastrophe at the hands of a three-headed space monster, the creatures take a back seat to the princess and her assassin's plot. The two strands of the story, human and monster, don't complement one another as they have in previous entries, resulting in an unsatisfying back and forth rather than a decent integration of the two strands. That said, it's really nice to see a mind-controlled princess, a female reporter, and the Shobijin driving the story forwards in a film that doesn't care about who their boyfriends are and what they might be doing.